Ethan Ross lived a quiet life in a small apartment on the edge of the city. He was a university student, studying computer engineering, and spent most nights in front of his computer. He liked silence, warm tea, and the soft humming of the streetlights outside. But that night was different. It began with a strange sound. Ethan had just put his cup of tea. On the desk when he heard it, a low, steady worry sound, like a machine warming up. It wasn't coming from his computer or the hallway. It was coming from the window. He turned his head slowly. A faint blue light was glowing behind the curtain. It wasn't like the yellow light of the street lamps. This one pulsed, like a heartbeat. His stomach tightened as a cold shiver ran down his back. "This can't be real," he whispered to himself. The light grew brighter. The worry became a high, soft vibration that made the glass tremble. Ethan stood from his chair and took a small step toward the window. The floor creaked under his bare feet. Suddenly the curtain moved as if pulled by wind, but the window was closed. A thin line of light appeared in the air, cutting across the glass. Then it widened. The world outside seemed to twist. Like a reflection on moving water, Ethan gasped. Someone stepped through the light. She wasn't human. At least, not fully. The figure wore a smooth silver suit that looked more like skin than fabric. Her tall, lean body moved with grace, like she belonged in that glowing doorway. Her skin shimmered softly, almost reflecting the blue light around her. She had large silver eyes that flickered as if they contained tiny stars. Ethan froze in shock. The figure stumbled slightly as her foot touched the carpet. She looked around the room, confused. "Wait," she muttered in a strange accent. "Wrong coordinates. This is not the station." Ethan couldn't breathe. He thought, for a crazy second, that it might be a prank, some kind of projection or costume. But then the light behind her started to close like a sliding door, and the blue glow faded away. Now she was inside his room, and the worry stopped. Silence filled the space. Only their breathing broke it. She looked at him. He looked at her. Ethan's hands moved without thinking. He grabbed the only thing nearby, a frying pan that he used to make midnight noodles. He held it up like a shield. The woman blinked, tilting her head. Her long silver hair shimmered as she moved. She raised her hands slowly, palms facing him, like she wanted to show she wasn't a threat. "Human," she said softly, the word not perfect but understandable. "Mistake." Ethan's voice cracked. Who are you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for a small device on her wrist, a band that wrapped around like a second layer of skin. A holographic display appeared in the air. Full of glowing symbols and numbers that Ethan couldn't read, his heart raced. This wasn't a dream. This was real. The woman spoke into the device in a language he didn't understand. It was musical, but fast, like wind passing through metal. Then she pressed something, and a mechanical beep filled the room. The hologram blinked red. She frowned. "Beacon." "Broken," she said slowly, struggling with the human words. "Wrong place? Wrong place?" Ethan repeated in disbelief. "This is my room." The woman looked around again. Her expression softened a little, but there was still tension in her body.
"Oh."
Like a soldier lost behind enemy lines. Ethan's mind screamed at him to run. Call someone. Do something. But another part of him, the part that built gadgets from old junk and dreamed about space when he was a kid, kept him standing there. "Are you alien?" he asked carefully. She looked at him with those silver eyes. She didn't nod, but the answer was clear. The silence returned for a moment, heavy and strange. Then the woman suddenly stumbled. Ethan noticed that her breathing was uneven. She leaned against his desk, her hand trembling slightly. Her suit had a faint cut near the shoulder, and tiny sparks of blue light flickered from it like leaking energy. "You're hurt," Ethan said without thinking. She frowned. "No. Danger," she whispered, then fell to her knees. Ethan dropped the frying pan and rushed toward her. He hesitated for a second. She was alien. For heaven's sake. But something inside him couldn't watch anyone collapse like that. He reached out slowly. The moment his hand touched her arm, felt a soft hum under her skin, like the vibration of a machine. Her body was warm, not cold. Her breathing was fast. Hey, stay with me," he said. She looked up at him, confused, like she didn't expect kindness. Ethan carefully helped her sit against the wall. He grabbed a blanket from his bed and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her suit shimmered under the fabric, making the blanket glow faintly. "What is your name?" he asked. She opened her mouth, then hesitated. "Zira," she finally said. The name rolled off her tongue like a breeze. "Okay, Zira," Ethan said, trying to stay calm. "I'm Ethan. You're safe here, I mean. Kinda safe." She tilted her head at the word safe, clearly still learning. But she didn't look afraid anymore. Lost her device, flickered weakly again. She pressed a button, and a small image appeared in the air. A map with star-like points. Ethan stared at it, eyes wide. "That's space," he whispered. Zira nodded slowly. "Home," she said softly, pointing to a cluster of bright lights. "This," she pointed to a small dot at the edge. "Mistake." Ethan couldn't help but laugh nervously. "Yeah, big mistake." But the situation wasn't funny. Zira's beacon, whatever it was broken. She didn't know how to get back. She was stranded in a human student's messy apartment. And worse, someone might come looking for her. Ethan had read enough science fiction to know that aliens didn't just wander alone. "Is someone coming?" he asked carefully. Zira nodded, then shook her head, then frowned, as if the language didn't fit what she wanted to say. "Drone. Search. But. Time. Okay. So someone will come. But not right now," Ethan said, trying to piece it together. She nodded slowly. Ethan ran a hand through his messy hair. This was insane. A real alien was in his room. His hands were shaking, but a strange calm started to settle in. He had always wanted something exciting to happen in his life, though maybe not this exciting. Zira looked at him again. Her silver eyes weren't cold. They were sharp, intelligent, but there was something vulnerable behind them. She seemed to study him like a scientist looks at an unknown creature. "Why?" "Help," she asked softly. Ethan shrugged. "Because you're hurt. And I'm not a monster." She stared for a moment, then let out a soft sound, a small, surprised laugh. It was the first time he'd heard her voice like that, human. "Strange," she whispered. "You have no idea," Ethan muttered with a grin. Minutes passed. The glowing symbols on her wrist slowly faded as the device ran low on power. Zira leaned back against the wall, breathing more evenly now. Ethan handed her a bottle of water. She stared at it, confused. "It's water," he explained. "You drink it." She tapped the bottle, then carefully lifted it to her lips. The way she sipped was awkward, like she'd only ever read about humans in a book. She coughed once, then gave a small nod of approval. "Good," she said. Ethan smiled. "Yeah, earth water. 5 stars." Outside, a soft wind rustled the trees. Everything looked the same as always. But for Ethan, nothing was the same anymore. He sat on the floor next to Zira, still clutching the frying pan just in case. She seemed calmer now. Her breathing matched his. Their worlds were completely different, yet for a moment, they shared the same silence. Zira touched the window glass, staring out at the night sky. "Your world," she said softly. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Not much, but it's home." But the way she looked at the stars told him she came from a place far beyond anything he could imagine. Ethan wanted to ask her 1,000 questions. About space, about her people, about how she got here. But she looked tired. Whatever happened before she arrived had drained her. "Rest," he said gently. "We'll figure it out tomorrow." She tilted her head again at the word rest, but she seemed to understand the tone. She leaned her head against the wall and closed her eyes. The soft blue glow around her dimmed a little, like a machine entering sleep mode. Ethan watched her for a long time, his mind spinning. A few hours ago, his biggest problem was a coding project due next week. Now, there was an alien woman sleeping against his wall. He whispered to himself, "No one's going to believe this." But deep down, he wasn't afraid anymore. Something inside him, something he didn't even know existed, was awake now. At around 3 a.m., as Ethan finally lay on his bed, Zyra's device gave a soft ping. A red symbol blinked on the hologram for a moment before fading away. Ethan didn't understand it. But Zyra's hand twitched in her sleep, as if sensing something, far above Earth. In the cold darkness of space, something shifted. A faint signal traveled between the stars. She wasn't alone, and Ethan's ordinary life had just ended. The red light of the overload timer glowed in the dark chamber. Smoke rose from the broken panels. Alien voices echoed through the walls like whispers made of glass. Captain Rowan Vale stood on the upper platform of the mine spire, his armor scorched, his pulse racing. The control panel flashed warning in symbols he could not read, but understood well. He had bought time, but not enough. The Valari soldiers kept coming. Their pale limbs moved fast, their weapons glowing with blue light. Rowan's rifle clicked empty. He threw it down and grabbed a fallen alien weapon. It was light and cold, and it hummed like a living thing. He aimed it at the nearest Valari and fired. The blue beam cut through the air like lightning. The creature fell, but 5 more replaced it. Down the corridor, Mara Lynn and the last 3 surviving human soldiers ran through collapsing hallways. The mine spire was tearing itself apart. Pipes burst from the walls. Energy fields flickered. The humming inside their heads grew louder. It was not just sound anymore. It was pressure. The tower was trying to speak to them, to break them, keep moving. Mara shouted. Her voice cracked, but she didn't slow down. Sergeant Harlan was gone. So were 2 more. Only Corporal Diaz, Private Liar, and herself remained. They carried what was left of the explosives and the backup relay device. Commands not answering, Diaz said between breaths. Come, Link's dead. They'll see the tower, Mara said. They'll know. She didn't want to say what they all knew in their hearts. Rowan was still inside. He was buying them time. He always did. Back in the core chamber, Rowan jumped down from the platform as a blast shook the floor. A Valari weapon beam struck the wall next to him, spraying sparks. He hit the ground hard and rolled, breathing fast. His ears rang. His vision blurred for a second, but he forced himself up. He checked the timer. 80 seconds left. A Valari soldier moved toward him, long arms reaching out. Their faces were smooth and eyeless, like they were carved from pale stone. They didn't breathe. They didn't speak with mouths. But their thoughts pressed into his skull like cold hands. Human, surrender. End of pain. Rowan bared his teeth. Not today. Pulled the alien weapon's trigger. A beam hit the creature in the chest, and it fell like a rag doll. He didn't stop. He fired again and again, moving forward, his boots slipping on the smooth floor. He was just one man. But humans had never needed big numbers to fight. They just needed reasons. And Rowan's reason was still running down the hallway, outside the mine spire. The night sky of Arden's Reach was turning red. The overload had triggered the tower's outer shields to collapse. From the hills, the human command ships could see the structure flashing like a storm cloud. Inside the main ship, General Carter watched the monitor with a clenched jaw. "Where's Captain Vale?" he demanded. "Inside the tower, sir," came the reply. Carter closed his eyes for a moment. He knew Rowan Vale. He knew what kind of man he was. If anyone could hold that tower long enough, it was him. But he also knew what that meant. He opened the come line anyway. "Captain Vale, this is command. If you can hear me, hold as long as you can. We'll get you out." Static answered him. Mara and the others reached the base of the mine spire. The outer doors were still open, but the ground outside was crawling with Valari reinforcements. Drones floated above like dark birds. Infantry moved through the sand in perfect lines. The Valari didn't feel fear or panic. They just moved. Cold and silent, Diaz crouched behind a broken wall. "There's no way we can get past them," Liar swore under his breath. "We're dead," No, Mara said. "We're not." She looked at the relay pack on Diaz's back. If they could link it to the mine spire's energy grid, They could send a feedback pulse through the tower that would make the overload 10 times stronger. It would destroy everything for kilometers around, including them, including Rowan. Her stomach twisted at the thought. But Rowan had stayed behind for them. She couldn't let that be for nothing. "We're setting the relay," she said. Diaz stared at her. "That'll fry us." She met his eyes. "Then we don't get caught." In the core chamber, Rowan ducked behind a console as a volley of blue energy beams hit the floor. His armor was cracked and blood ran down his arm. But he kept moving. He could feel the tower trying to get inside his head. It whispered things: his name, his memories, the faces of people he lost. "You will die. You will lose. She will die too." He laughed, a rough sound. "Yeah, maybe, but not like this." He ripped a power conduit from the floor and jammed it into the alien interface. Sparks flew. The alien systems screamed in their strange, silent way. The tower's pulse faltered for a moment, and in that tiny moment, Rowan found a rhythm. Valari fought with perfect patterns. Rowan fought with chaos. He jumped over the railing, rolled under a beam, and used the alien weapon like a club when it ran out of power. He didn't fight like a machine. He fought like a storm. For a second, the Valari line broke. Mara and Diaz worked fast on the relay, attaching wires to the outer energy nodes. The Valari army was moving closer. Drones scanned the air with thin blue lights. Liar aimed his rifle at the closest wave. "We're outnumbered," he said softly. Mara tightened the last clamp. "We always are." The relay beeped once. A green light flicked on. "It's ready," she said. Diaz nodded grimly. "Once we trigger it, the feedback can't be stopped." Rowan won't make it out. Ara's hands shook. She stared up at the glowing tower. She could almost feel him inside, fighting, bleeding, refusing to give up. Her heart ached. She remembered the look in his eyes when he refused to press the trigger, the way he held her hand, the way he defied the mission for her. "I know," she whispered. But they didn't have time to wait. If the Velari stabilized the Mind Spire, humanity would lose the war. She raised her hand to activate the relay. A voice cut through the static on her comm. "Mara?" She froze. "Rowan." His voice was rough and tired, but alive. "You didn't run far enough?" She laughed, but tears burned her eyes. "You're still alive." "For now," he said. "I've got 80 seconds before this thing blows." She closed her eyes, trying to stay calm. "We're setting the relay outside. It'll make the blast bigger." "I know." Pause. "Do it now." Her voice cracked. "You'll die." Another pause. Then his voice came back, low and steady. "We all die someday. Just make sure this counts." Mara bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell him no. But she also knew who he was. Rowan Vale wasn't afraid to die. He was only afraid of failing the people he cared about. She whispered, "I'll see you again." "Yeah," he said. "Count on it." Rowan threw himself back against the core console as Valari beams scorched the air around him. He had less than a minute left. The overload was reaching its peak. The floor shook like an earthquake. The tower's light turned from pale blue to burning red. A group of Velari advanced in perfect formation. They were stronger, faster, smarter, but they didn't understand what it meant to fight for someone else. Rowan pulled a small photo from his vest, a crumpled picture of his old squad. Taken years before the war turned them all into ghosts. He looked at it once, then tucked it back inside. "Let's finish this," he said. He ran straight at them. Outside, Mara and the others triggered the relay. A deep, thunderous pulse shook the sand. The tower screamed not in sound, but in thought. Valari soldiers stopped mid-step, their heads jerking upward. The Mind Spire began to glow brighter and brighter. Red light spilled into the night sky like fire. "Move," Mara shouted. They ran across the sand, dodging drone beams and enemy fire. The ground cracked under their boots. A storm of energy rose behind them. Diaz threw a smoke grenade to cover their retreat. Liar fired at the nearest drones, bringing 2 of them down, but Mara didn't look back. She couldn't. If she did, she might turn around. She might try to run back into the tower, and she couldn't do that. Not now. Inside, Rowan slammed into the last group of Valari. His body ached. His armor was cracked open in 3 places. But he didn't care. He used the alien weapon like a hammer, swinging it with everything he had left. One went down. Then another. A beam hit his shoulder, spinning him to the floor. Pain exploded through him, but he crawled forward. The control console was just ahead. The timer showed 0:14. He dragged himself up, one arm hanging useless at his side. The Valari surrounded him, their heads tilting in perfect unison. A cold voice filled his mind. Surrender. Accept the end. There is no victory. Rowan spit blood onto the floor. You don't know us very well. He slammed his fist on the manual override. The console exploded with light. The Mind Spire's power surged. Energy raced down its veins like fire through dry wood. The Valari outside turned toward the tower. Their perfect formation, faltering for the first time, Mara, Diaz, and Liar threw themselves into a trench behind a ridge as the tower split open at its core. The sky turned white. The explosion ripped through the desert, swallowing everything in a wave of burning light and thunder. The Valari army was torn apart like paper in a storm. Drones shattered. The ground shook for miles. Mara covered her head, the blast shaking her bones. The sound was so loud it felt like silence. Heat rolled over them in a wave, and then darkness. For a long time, Mara didn't move. Her ears rang. Her vision was blurred. When she finally pushed herself up, the Mind Spire was gone. Only a smoking crater remained. The red lights were out. The humming was silent. Diaz groaned beside her. We're alive? She coughed, nodding. Yeah. The sky above Ardent's reach was gray and heavy with smoke. The Mind Spire was gone. Only a giant crater remained where the alien tower once stood. The sand was black and cracked like burned glass. Mara Lynn stood on the ridge, her uniform covered in dust and blood. The wind whipped through her hair as she stared at the ruins. She hadn't moved for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stood there, waiting for something that might never come. Behind her, soldiers and medics rushed across the battlefield. Dropships landed one after another, bringing reinforcements and aid teams. The Valari army was going to wiped out by the blast. For the first time in years, humans had won something big, but it didn't feel like victory. Diaz walked up slowly, his left arm wrapped in bandages. Command wants you at the triage tent, he said quietly. They're pulling everyone in for checkups. Mara didn't look away from the crater. Any word? Diaz didn't have to ask who she meant. He shook his head. No signal. No body either. It's just wreckage. She pressed her lips together. A cold weight filled her chest. She had heard stories before of soldiers lost in explosions like this, of commanders who never came home. But this was Rowanvale, Captain Rowanvale. The man who refused to follow death's rules. A part of her refused to believe he was gone. The next few hours blurred into a slow storm of activity. The triage tents filled with wounded. Engineers set up sensor grids around the crater to scan for any remaining alien activity. Command celebrated, but their voices were tired. The victory had cost too much. General Carter stood over the battlefield map with a grim face. We finally broke their control, he said. One tower down means the network is fractured. They'll fall back. We'll hit them where it hurts, Officer asked, in Captain Vale. The general paused. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he said softly, mark him as missing in action. But keep searching. Yeah. Mara stood outside the tent and heard every word. That night, the sky was filled with distant thunder. Not a storm, just the aftershocks of the explosion still echoing across the region. Mara sat on a broken supply crate, staring at the dark horizon. Diaz and Liar were nearby, trying to fix a damaged comm unit. No one said much. She held a small metal tag in her hand. It was Rowan's dog tag. She had found it near the trench after the blast. It was scratched but whole. She rubbed her thumb over his name again and again. It was the only thing left of him. "You should get some rest," Dia said gently. She shook her head. "I can't." He sighed. "Mara, he wouldn't want you to, don't." Her voice was sharp. "Don't tell me what he would want." Diaz fell silent. He understood. They all did. Rowan wasn't just another soldier. He was the kind of leader people followed not because of rank, but because he made them believe. Deep beneath the crater, in the cold dark, a red light flickered. A single human body lay trapped under twisted alien metal. Armor cracked. Breathing slow, Rowan Vale was still alive. He had no idea how long it had been since the blast. His head throbbed, and his right leg was pinned under a heavy beam. He tried to move it, but felt nothing below the knee. Pain burned through him, but it was dull far away. His armor's emergency systems had kept him alive. He coughed, tasting blood. "Still here," he whispered. The alien core around him was broken, but not dead. Faint pulses of blue light crawled through the debris like dying embers. And then he heard a weak voice inside his mind. "Not human. Not entirely? Why do you resist?" The Valari hive mind whispered. "You should not be alive." Rowan laughed weakly. "Yeah, that's kind of our thing. You cannot win. You only delay what is inevitable." He tilted his head back against the rubble. "You really don't get it, do you? We don't fight because we think we'll win. We fight because someone has to." The Valari presence flickered. It was weaker now, broken when the tower fell. But it was still there watching him like a wounded animal. Rowan clenched his jaw. He wasn't dead yet. And as long as he was breathing, this fight wasn't over. Above ground, Mara couldn't sleep. She walked alone to the crater's edge, ignoring the guards who told her it wasn't safe. She sat on the black sand and looked down at the twisted remains of the mine spire. It felt like staring into the mouth of a beast. She closed her eyes and remembered his voice. The last thing he said, "We all die someday. Just make sure this counts." She whispered into the wind, "You didn't die. I know you didn't." The sand under her boots trembled soft, but real. Her eyes snapped open. In the command tent, alarms went off. The sensor grid flashed. A faint energy reading was coming from the center of the crater. General Carter rushed to the screen. "What is that?" "Not alien," an engineer said. "Human life signs. Weak but there." The general's voice grew sharp. "Send a rescue team. Now." Mara ran toward the crater before anyone could stop her. Soldiers shouted her name, but she didn't hear them. Her heart was hammering too loud. She grabbed a helmet and a climbing harness from a nearby crate and sprinted down the steep, cracked slope that the air down there was thick and hot. Steam rose from broken energy conduits. The remains of the tower jutted out like sharp black teeth. She moved carefully, stepping over glowing cables and crushed metal. "Rowan," she shouted. Her voice echoed through the crater. "Rowan, answer me." For a moment, there was nothing. Then faint and broken through static came a voice. "Mara?" Her breath caught in her throat. "I'm here." Rowan was half buried under wreckage when he saw the light from her helmet. For a moment, he thought it was a dream. But then her voice cut through the smoke, strong and real. She knelt beside him, hands shaking. "You idiot," she whispered. "You're alive." He tried to smile but winced instead. "Told you. I don't die easy." She looked at the metal crushing his leg. "We'll get you out. Just hold on." He caught her wrist weakly. "Mara." "If this doesn't stop," she said sharply. "No speeches. You're not dying here." For a second, the world was quiet. Just the sound of their breathing and the faint hum of broken alien technology. And then the rescue team arrived, sliding down the crater with cutting tools and medkits. The team worked fast. They cut through the metal with portable plasma saws, sparks lighting the darkness. Mara stayed by his side the whole time, holding his hand, talking to him, refusing to let him slip away. Rowan was pale, but his eyes stayed open. "You didn't leave," he said. She squeezed his hand. Neither did you. When the last piece of metal came free, the medics lifted him carefully onto a stretcher. His armor was cracked, his body bruised, but he was alive. The soldiers around them cheered softly, not loud, not wild, but real. A cheer born from hope. As they carried him up the crater, Rowan tilted his head toward Mara. "You owe me 1 drink." She laughed through her tears. "You can have 10. Rowan woke up 2 days later in the medical bay of the flagship. The room smelled like disinfectant and steel. His right leg was wrapped in a support brace, and his chest ached when he breathed. But he was alive. Mara was sitting beside the bed, her head resting on her crossed arms. She looked exhausted but peaceful. When she heard him stir, she looked up immediately. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." His voice was rough. "Still here?" She gave a small smile. "Yeah, you really don't die easy." Rowan stared at the ceiling for a moment. "The tower, gone," she said. "Completely." The Volari retreated. "Command says the whole sector's ours." For the first time in years, Rowan felt something strange in his chest. Hope later that day, General Carter came to see him. The older man stood by the bed with his hands behind his back. His face was hard as stone, but his voice was softer than usual. "You disobeyed a direct order," Carter said. Rowan met his gaze. "Yes, sir." "You risked your team. You nearly got yourself killed." "Yes, sir." The general stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, "And you saved more lives than this army can count. The Volari lost their central command in this sector because of you." Rohan blinked. He didn't know what to say. Carter leaned closer. "You gave them something they don't understand. Fear, the Volari don't understand. Why someone would risk everything for someone else. They don't have heart." He straightened. "But we do." In the days that followed, the story of Arden's Reach spread across the human colonies like wildfire. Soldiers spoke of how one man stayed behind when logic said he should give up. How he fought alone in the dark, refusing to surrender. They called it the last stand at the mine spire. But Rowan didn't feel like a hero. He lay in his bed, watching the stars outside the viewport. Thought of the people who hadn't made it back. Harlan, the others. He hadn't saved everyone. He never could. But Mara's voice always brought him back to the present. She visited every day, sitting by his side. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they said nothing. But it was enough. One evening, Mara brought him something, a small piece of black crystal, smooth and cold. "They found this in the crater," she said. "It's part of the mine spire core." Rowan raised an eyebrow. "You brought me a souvenir from the thing that almost killed us?" She smirked. "I thought you'd like it." He held the crystal in his hand. It glowed faintly, like it was remembering something. Maybe it was. Maybe the Volari were still out there, watching, waiting. "Think they'll come back?" he asked. Mara's smile faded, but her voice was steady. "Probably, but next time we'll be ready." Months later, when the Volari attacked another colony, their fleets hesitated. They remembered Arden's Reach. They remembered the explosion. They remembered the one human who didn't surrender.